With regards to missile defense, tangible evidence of North Korean and Iranian ambitions confirms that the limited ballistic missile threat to the homeland has matured from a theoretical to a practical consideration. Moreover, we are concerned about the potential for these lethal technologies to proliferate to other actors. We're also working with the Missile Defense Agency to invest in tailored solutions to address the challenges that advancing missile technologies impose on our current ballistic missile defense system architecture. With the decreasing seasonal ice, the Arctic is evolving into a true strategic approach to the homeland. As such, we work with our premier partner, Canada, and other stakeholders to develop our communications, domain awareness, infrastructure, and presence in order to protect economic interests, maritime safety, and our freedom of action. Defending the homeland in depth requires partnerships with our neighbors, Canada, Mexico, and the Bahamas. Our futures are inextricably bound together, and this needs to be a good thing in the security context. The stronger and safer they are, the stronger our partnerships, the safer we all are collectively, and this creates our common competitive security advantage for North America.
But why couldn't we, if not specifically for you, generically do some combining of these major commands?
So have a very, very intensive homeland defense task, which I think is growing because of the growing threats and vulnerability to our countries. And so my responsibilities range all the way from nuclear command and control to ICBM missile defense requirements, cruise missile requirements, and all those are going up. They're not going down. And then there is something different and important about the partnerships that we have on the approaches to the homeland. The Arctic is going to be more of an approach to the homeland. It's going to be a strategic approach to the homeland, and it's going to require the same Defense Department interest and engagement and activity that any of the approaches to the homeland have and any of the bodies of water in which we want to have a safe competitive advantage.
Much time has expired. Mr. Turner, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Jacoby, thank you for being here today and for all of your leadership. One of the issues that we struggle with in this committee is the issue of missile defense. As you know, the threat is proliferating, both of weapons of mass destruction and with specific missile technology that can place mainland United States at risk. The President has now canceled 2 missile defense systems that were intended to protect mainland United States, both what was known as the third site, which the Bush administration had proposed, and even Phase 4 now of the phased adaptive approach, which was intended to provide that mainland coverage. This committee and Congress, through the National Defense Authorization Act, has continued to advance what the administration would have called a hedging strategy, but we actually consider to be a sound strategy of locating a missile defense site on the East Coast that would give us that additional ability that has been lost with the third site and with the phased adaptive approach, and also would give us greater ability to protect that site with it being within our homeland. In FY14, the NDAA, we included a requirement and funding for the Missile Defense Agency to update its plans and required documentation for this potential East Coast missile defense site. We're obviously looking for your insight and support for that effort. We both authorized and appropriated, which means Congress had to do a great deal of deliberation in deciding to move forward with the East Coast missile defense site. We want to reduce the deployment time frame when the United States decides to deploy the site. What would a third interceptor site on the East Coast of the United States provide for missile defense coverage to the United States? Would it be prudent if all the appropriate required documentation was completed to deploy the site sooner than later? And although there are those who have said at times it's not presently needed, we all know that the future development of threats pose an environment in which that would be incredibly helpful. We'd like your words on that, sir.
Congressman, thank you. A third site, if you built it, would give us better weapons access. It would give us increased inventory and increased battle space with regards to a threat coming from the direction of the Middle East. So those are just facts, and that's what it would give to the combatant commander, and that's me, the one that's accountable for the defense of the homeland from ICBM threats. Currently, we know that in the Middle East, Iran continues to, while we are doing the 5+1, and we're all hopeful that 5+1 contributes to safety and security in the Middle East and into our own country, they have not stopped aspirational goals towards ICBM technologies. They've successfully put a missile space vehicle into orbit, and that demonstrates the types of technologies that you need to develop an ICBM. So we're watching them closely. I think it was very prudent to direct us, the Missile Defense Agency, to do a site selection. There were 4 sites that were determined. We were close partners with Admiral Searing every step of the way to include final say on what were going to be the top 4 sites and what were the characteristics and criteria used for selecting them. Those have been selected, and according to the directions that we received, we're moving forward on the EIS for all 4 sites, which should put us in a position to have those completed in the next 2 years. So I think we're on the right path to provide options in continuing development for a 3rd site and the ability to outpace a threat from the Middle East.
Well, sir, I want to thank you for those comments, because I've always said that everyone who questions this site is just 3 classified briefings away from being a real great fan of it, and everyone not having access to those briefings and everyone not availing themselves of that. Your statements in this hearing of support for that 3rd site are certainly important, because it shows, in your judgment, the importance of our making certain that we rise to the threat. So I appreciate those statements.
Yeah, Congressman, I want to clarify that I think that it's going to put us in a position to make a good decision in a timely fashion.
Excellent. Thank you, General.
More difficult. I want to follow up on the missile defense issue, and this is something you and I talked about last night. Mr. Turner makes the point about the importance of an East Coast missile defense system, and by and large he's right. The more missile defense we have to protect the homeland, and the more we can discourage potential threats. And that's not even really classified. I mean, you look at North Korea, you look at Iran, you look at a whole bunch of other places, and what could potentially happen out there. The concern that I have is sort of following up on Ms. Spear's point, and that is that the system that we have right now isn't working particularly well. I want to spend money on missile defense. I think it's critically important. But to spend money on developing a new site so we can put missiles and radars and sensors and spend $4 billion on a system that can't hit a target in a test strikes me as unintelligent, would be the polite way to put it. I'd rather spend that money on what you just said. Test the existing system, get it to work. Get us to that point. I'm worried about even deploying more missiles, in our 2 existing sites when they can't hit a target. Why don't we spend money on radars and sensors and tests to get to the point where we actually have a system that works? Now, I suppose we could, of course, public hearings like this undermine what I'm about to say here. I suppose we could just bluff. We could convince our adversaries, oh, we got these missiles. They could work, but unfortunately we're in an open society, so we can't do that very successfully. They know, even before I said this, that those tests failed because it's a matter of public record. So shouldn't we be wiser about how we spend that money to spend it on getting our missile defense system to the point where it actually works instead of just feeling good about having it deployed?
Congressman, I think we all want the same thing.
That's not entirely true. Believe me, if you sat here on the nights when we do the NDAA and we argue about this stuff on this committee, I can assure you we do not all want the same thing. But go ahead.
Well, based on our conversation last night, I think you and I want the same thing, which is
that I'll agree with.
Effective missile defense for the people of the United States, and they deserve it. And they've spent a lot of money, and we've made a lot of effort. I believe that a lot of this has been theoretical threat, the theoretical capability, that the threat, the pace of the threat has become real, and the threat is real, and it's practical, and we've got some work to do to continue making sure that we have a practical system in place. But we are infinitely better off with the system that we have, and I believe it does have the capability, gives me confidence against the current limited threat. The question is, what is the right path to improve that system to outpace the threats, both from North Korea and any others that could now highly a highly sought and proliferated technology out there around the world.
And I would submit, just for the record, that the wisest way to do that is not to spend money developing a new site until we get the system that we need to rely on working. Spend the money on that.
Congressman, I hope that in my answer to that question, I tried to indicate that I believe that it was important that we do things simultaneously. And so there are things that we can do to be prepared to make a decision on whether we need a third site or not in the future. But if you start everything from scratch in the day that you decide you need something, then we're always behind. And so I think that we've been directed to take prudent steps. I don't think we're at a decision point for a third site, but I think we've set ourselves up to make a decision in a timely fashion, and I think that's smart to do.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Back, Mr. Lamborn for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for your service. And General Jacoby, I want to thank you in particular for the great things that your team has done helping our homeland and helping locally in Colorado Springs for some of the wildfires that we had. The assistance that your people gave was tremendous. So thank you for that. We've had some discussion about missile defense, and I have to point out that there have been some budget cuts in the last few years, last 4 or 5 years, that I don't think were helpful. The purpose of testing is to find out what's wrong and to isolate those flaws and make improvements, and so that there is success afterwards. So I'm glad to see that we're finally, with this administration, getting some further funding to reverse some of that. Do you feel confident that we have a good system in place? Not that it can't do better at testing, and not that we can't continue to make improvements, which I believe we are, but are you confident that we have a good system right now?
I'm confident that the system in place right now can handle the threat that exists right now. I think that what we've learned now is that there has to be continued smart investment that outpaces the threat. And Congressman, one of the things we haven't talked about yet, my first dollar would go to Intel. So that, you know, if your measure of effectiveness is that you're outpacing the threat, you need to know a lot about the threat. And so we need to do more in understanding everything there is to know about North Korean missile capabilities, everything there is to know about Iranian programs, to make sure that we can make threat-informed decisions, not just resource-informed decisions.
Thank you. I appreciate that perspective. And you did mention North Korea, and I think Iran would be in that same list. On a slightly different list, cruise missiles. What nations now have the ability to send strategic ballistic cruise missiles to the U.S. from great distances?
Thanks, Congressman. Yeah, cruise missiles are proliferating as well, but the nation that has the highest level of sophistication and can pose the greatest threat to North America is Russia. And they continue to make very, very important advances in both conventional and nuclear cruise missiles, both aerial delivered and submarine delivered. The first of the 12 projected Severdevance cruise missile firing submarine, nuclear submarines is at sea and being worked up, and the missile that it uses is already demonstrated its effectiveness. So this is a capabilities question, and we have always believed that having a capability and intention to defend the country against aerospace threats is a capabilities issue, not just an intent issue. And so we've been directed by the Secretary to ensure that we are also looking at how to provide effective defense against cruise missiles in a way that outpaces any threats, to include the Russians.
And what do you believe, General, should be the way forward on that?
Well, we have a way forward right now, Congressman, and that's a three-phased approach that's been approved by the Pentagon, and it starts with getting the national capital region right. And right now we're going through a test phase where two things have been added or being added to the national capital region, the stateside affordable radar in conjunction with a joint elevated net sensor, the JLENS balloons, and what they're trying to accomplish is integrating that into an overall defensive plan that allows us to see, detect, track, warn, and in the future hopefully engage cruise missiles that could pose a threat to the national capital region. Then the issue will be, if the cruise missile threat continues to evolve, how do we then take and export that capability where we think we might need it to defend other strategically or critical infrastructure locations in the United States and Canada?
Okay, thank you very much. And lastly, funding for an improved kill vehicle. That's something that we did include in the fiscal year 14 National Defense Authorization Act. I think it's valuable. What's your perspective on that?
The budget hasn't been released, and missile defense wasn't addressed in the rollout that the Secretary made earlier in the week. I would be very happy to have funding against improved kill vehicle, and I'm hopeful that we'll see the ability to do that sometime in the future.
Thank you very much.
Too much time has expired. Mr. Bridenstine.